Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are back from this morning's session, we are so excited to see you here today. If not, welcome to day 3 of our Financial Literacy Week celebration. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Blaine Cower. I have the tremendous pleasure of leading the homeowner services team here at Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity. And today, on day 3 of our Financial Literacy Week celebration, we are talking today about planning for your financial future. This is so critically important. We focus a lot on our short-term financial goals, maybe, paying down our debt, getting our credit score up, building our savings. But it's so important that while we're doing those things and really in tandem of achieving those goals, we're also working to achieve some of our longer-term goals and ultimately setting up a plan to protect our finances long-term. So with that said, we're really excited to bring this session to you all here today. And I have the tremendous pleasure of introducing you to our expert who is joining us today, Lawrence Smith. Hi, Lawrence.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure.
Lawrence, for our attendees, Lawrence is a certified financial planner and wealth planning advisor with ELS Wealth Management. Lawrence, please feel free to introduce yourself a little more in depth to our audience.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let me just start off by congratulating the Habitat for Humanity. 46 years now, bringing people together, bringing people together for home to build homes, community, and hope. So I think that's an awesome mission, and I'm just excited to be a part of it. As you said, I am Lawrence Smith. I'm the president of ELS Vision Wealth Management. We're a financial planning firm with registered representatives of Lincoln Financial Advisors. And our mission is to partner with our clients to help them to create the financial picture that they envision for themselves. I am a certified financial planner. I do specialize in comprehensive financial planning with successful professionals and business owners. And I'm also registered with the National Football League Players Association as an NFLPA certified financial advisor. So I am excited to be here. I'm excited to be a part of this important conversation and looking forward to dialogue with you as we look to build generational wealth and be able to create legacies as well.
Amen. Lawrence, we're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for providing that quick intro. And hey, to our attendees, we want to remind you that we want to hear from you all. We want this to be an interactive presentation today. Make sure, please, that you send us your questions throughout the presentation using the chat box, or you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen as well. And we promise that we'll get to as many of those questions as we can today. Lawrence, I want to pitch the first question to you to kind of frame up the conversation that we'll have today. At Dallas Habitat, you talked about our mission, right? We're all about building communities and hope, in addition to what everybody knows us for best, which is homes, right? And really, we focus a lot on homeownership, of course, is what we do at Habitat, and how homeownership can be one of the best ways for families to build what we like to call generational wealth. Can you talk to us a little bit about what generational wealth is and why it's such an important thing for families?
Well, I would like to start us off with a faith-based idea, right? And there's a famous scripture that says that a good man or a good person will leave a legacy for their children's children, right? This concept that as we are creating wealth, the concept is not to hoard it for ourselves, but to think about the next generation that's coming after us, and to be able to make the world a better place by not just thinking about my concept of my lifespan, but being able to do things that will last from generation to generation, to build on each other. My father, who's gone now, but he had this haunting statement that said that the sons should slay their fathers. And the concept behind that is not literally that we should slay our fathers, right? But it goes deeper than that to say, listen, I want to accomplish something, and then I'm going to build something that you can build on top of, that you can do some things that are even greater. But it's going to take somebody to say, hey, even if I have nothing, I'm going to lay a new foundation for a new person to be able to do something that is better than I am. So one of the great concepts, right, is home ownership. that I'm going to purchase a home and I'm going to have this tangible asset that's going to have value that I'm going to be able to benefit off of, but then I'm going to be able to pass that land and that property to the next person and the next generation. So this concept, generational wealth, means I'm going to go beyond just my own lifespan, but have something that lives beyond my time here on this earth.
I love that. And that's ultimately what we all want as parents, right? We want our kids to have something better off than we had the opportunity to have. You know, Lawrence, I think about, like you said, homeownership is certainly one of the best ways to do this. Off the cuff, what are some other ways you think that we can leave a legacy for our children beyond homeownership, or in addition to?
Yeah. So I'm going to go into that, but I want to make sure I say something here, because there might be some people here that don't have children, right? So when we're talking about, legacies, it does not have to be just specifically through your seed. That also has to do with the concept of, I'm going to make this world a better place by investing in things that the next generation coming after me will be able to use, right? So I don't want us to only be about children, although for those of us with children, making sure we're keeping them in mind is the first stage of generational wealth, right? So now when we're talking about that, in order for you to leave that legacy, it has to be something that you own. So the first concept in that is tangible assets. So of course you have your real estate. Of course you have, that means the home that you own, and maybe other properties that you end up buying, other land that you end up buying. Of course, it means the ownership of market-based investments, right? This would be your stocks, your mutual funds, your ETFs, your, things that you own in that scenario, which brings value to you. And let's not forget or run past business ownership, right? For those of us who are entrepreneurial in nature, obviously I'm entrepreneurial, but those that have that concept in mind, you're wanting to have this business that you're either going to pass the business down to the next generation, meaning your kids, or it becomes a tangible asset that you're able to sell, right? So all of these are tangible assets that you can have ownership, that you can pass down to the next generation. Now, I don't want to also skip past the intangible, right? The knowledge that you're getting. I just want to applaud anybody that's actually on this call today, right? Because some of the things that I will be able to talk about, and Blaine will be able to talk about, you're going to be able to put that in practice for yourself. But even if you don't, you're going to be able to take this knowledge and then be able to pass it down to the next generation by saying, hey, I learned something. And although maybe I don't have all these assets that I can build, maybe that time may have passed me by, but at the same token, I can pass on that knowledge, and I'm going to have a positive, I'm going to build hope that you can do it. Because that's what's missing sometimes. If you're talking about a next generation that doesn't see any hope, they're not going to be able to build it up. But I promise you, the things that I'm going to be talking about today are things that can be done and should be done and will be done. Even if you can't do it, you can give it to the next generation.
That's incredible. Lawrence, listen, gems already being dropped. Y'all, if you're a note taker, make sure that you're taking notes for this, because Lawrence is about to get into some really amazing information. But Lawrence, I love what you just said about financial education. That in and of itself, inherently, there's value in financial education and being financially savvy that we can pass along to future generations. Like you said, whether it's to our own children, maybe, until last year, I was in 100% aunt mode, right? I'm all about my nephew, right? I didn't have kids of my own, so I poured into my nephew, right? And so he was one of my mentees when it comes to financial education, something I'm personally very passionate about, right? So whoever that is that we can pour into, let's not forget about that sort of intangible asset that we have. All of you all who are on today's call, like Lawrence said, who are taking time out of your own schedule to learn this information. Specifically, I think it's so important to focus as well, Lawrence, on when it comes to generational wealth in general, the statistics on the racial wealth gap are so staggering. We've talked about this earlier in the week, and I think it's a theme that kind of carries us through several of these financial topics that we're digging into this week. You know, on average, we know that white families have something like 8 times as much wealth as Black families, 5 times as much wealth as Hispanic families. Really, we know that homeownership rates haven't drastically changed since the 60s when the Fair Housing Act was passed. And so I wonder if we might be able to dig in a little bit to, you know, why this is so critically important, this conversation for communities of color, and specifically how, you know, building our wealth and then preserving our wealth can help break that cycle and close that racial wealth gap that we're experiencing.
Yeah. So, you know, Blaine, what I would like to do is run down 2 tracks here. All right. And I think these 2 tracks need to be in context with each other, because I think sometimes as individuals, we will get too sidetracked by one track or the other. Right. So let me walk down these 2 tracks with you about the racial wealth gap. And I want to then pivot that back to us as individuals, right? So the Brookings Institute is a nonpartisan institute. I don't care what political aisle you're on, right? They both quote Brookings all the time because there's a lot of research that they've done, and they're not trying to, you know, prove a point either way, right? It's not nonpartisan. And one of the things that they primarily research is the issue of economics. And one of the things that they found in their research is that even African Americans with advanced degrees that own their homes, that have high paying jobs and engage in all the individual behaviors, right, that we typically want, right, you know, people to engage, that at the end of the day, when we compare the wealth that they have, it's typically still going to be much lower than their white peers, right? And the research determined that individual level factors, it's simply not enough to give as an explanation for the differences in the economic fortunes of Black people and white people. And so there's no way of getting around the consequences of previous years of, you know, public and private throughout American history, that there's no need to, you know, rehash for this particular call, right? So there's systematic issues that are at play, and there are going to be people and organizations, for whatever reason, that people will want to be involved in to try to tackle those issues. And I'm not, you know, those are fine and dandy, and those that we feel the need to be a part of that as a part of what their passions are, that's an awesome thing to do. We need to figure out a way to bring this gap together, right? That's the collective track. Right, that's the collective track, and those that are trying to address that issue from a collective side of things, there's going to be more than what we do as an individual level to try to address that. It's just the reality. All right. Now, here's the reality, though. There's a collective track, and there is the individual track. Here's the better way for me to explain this. If I am able to leave $10 million to my child, it's going to be a blessing to that child, regardless of the fact that Elon Musk is giving $500 billion, right? We're going to benefit off of what we can do. And so for us as individuals, we as individuals must decide, hey, the parts that I can address for my own family, for my own generation, I can go down that path and be able to stop some things that are generational generational curses or generational issues that just happened because we didn't have knowledge of it. Now I'm able to get that knowledge. And as I'm able to get that knowledge, I can then be able to take that information to make a difference for my family and for my children and for the communities that I care about. So maybe I'm not going to be able to give, you know, that the HBCU that I went to won't have $1 billion like Harvard does. But the HBCU that I went to will benefit by what I am able to give. And the problem isn't that it doesn't have Harvard's endowment. The problem is that it doesn't have the endowment because we're not giving. But what if we as individuals decide that we're going to take on our own individual decisions to be good with their generational wealth, to be good stewards of our assets, and make our own individual decisions? So yes, racial wealth gap is real. It's not something we can pretend doesn't exist. And those who want to take on that collective fight, you are honored to do so. But from an individual sake, we need to do the things that we could do individually to protect our families as well.
Lawrence, I love that perspective so much. Thank you so much for articulating that so beautifully, because I think that sometimes these systemic issues that we're facing, like the racial wealth gap, feel so incredibly overwhelming, and we do lose hope. We think, you know what, I count myself out before I even take the first step in the process, right? And so this is really, this whole week celebration is about being uplifting and motivating. And so to our attendees, we want you to know, to Lawrence's point, absolutely, there is something that we can be doing on a very individualized level to be able to make progress in this way. I'm hyped up. Who is ready to get started on this? Send us a note in the chat. I see some chats coming in so far. Lawrence, we'll move on to our next question for you. So, I know that sometimes it can be easier or seem more urgent, I should say, to focus ourselves on achieving our short-term financial goals, whether it's, paying down our debt, boosting our credit score, building our short-term savings, whatever those things might be, sometimes to the neglect of our long-term financial goals. Maybe we know it's important, it just really hasn't surfaced as a priority for us yet. I wonder, Lawrence, what advice do you have for attendees on today's call about how we might go about prioritizing our long-term goals, even in tandem, with tackling some of our more short-term financial goals?
No. So first of all, I think that if you're thinking about some of your short-term goals, right, in the whole concept of things, that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're talking about the foundation, right? And this is where, as a CFP, we sometimes become less popular than what you'll hear on the radio and all of this and the TV and the guy doing the YouTube video, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes what's being sold isn't hope, but what's been sold is tricks, right? And so hope is built on a solid foundation. So the solid foundation of your plan, right, does mean that you've got to have that foundation. A house that's built on sinking sand isn't going to last, right? We need to have the house built on rock. So what does that mean? Well, debt, right, and more specifically bad debt, right, that's sinking sand. So having a strategy that's going to go after taking out your debt is long-term planning and short-term planning in reality, because at the end of the day, it's never going to work for me to be able to build this future if I am at the same token, falling into deeper and deeper debt because I'm never acknowledging it, right? So, I don't think you're going to need to bring in the censors here because I'm about to use the B word. We'll see. I hope not. But the B word is coming, right? And the B word here is budget. And for too many, there's a lot of us that say, yikes, that's a scary word. There's what kind of, but budgeting is very, very important, right? And so you cannot build generational wealth without a budget. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And everybody's budget's going to be different because everybody has competing priorities, okay? But one of the things that I would suggest here, right? And I'm suggesting this as a financial planner, that we start off, if we've got issues of foundational issues, we address that foundation. Well, what do I mean by that? If we don't know how to establish that budget, there are resources with you, right? Because ultimately in real life, if you're going to build generational wealth, you're going to partner with a CFP or a financial advisor. So why not go ahead and get the practice of partnering with someone by partnering with the organization that's going to help you in that area. Some of the resources that I see that are popular include Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. That's a great one that I hear out there. YNAB, You Need a Budget. That's another one, a great resource that will help you. You can actually join groups in these organizations. There's also some faith-based alternatives as well. Crown Financial, awesome. D-Free, these are also great sources here. DeForest Suarez is the name of the person who came up with that. But join these groups and collectively come up with that strategy and build that foundation. And when it comes to debt reduction, one of the things that I would make sure that you do is that you have SMART goals that are assigned for that as your foundation. All right. And Blaine, you mind if I, speak a few more minutes on this, because I think this is going to be important.
Please.
The
Absolutely.
foundation that we're talking about, that foundation means 3 to 6 months in of your essential expenses in the savings account as part of the foundation. Making sure you have disability insurance for those of us that are working, right, and have employers, that's part of the foundation. The SMART goals for your debt reduction plan. Maybe you can do some investments and still have some debt, right? There's different people who have different theories about that. But for this conversation on the foundation, it's not that you have to be debt free, but it does mean you have to have a debt reduction plan. So your budget says, hey, by this point, I will be debt free, right? Then life insurance and of course a health insurance. These are all part of the foundation before we get into some of the other investments that you could be able to use to build generational wealth. So start with that foundation, and then we can move on to some of the other ways to build wealth that I'm going to talk about in a second.
That's amazing. Yes. All those things. So I will say a quick couple plugs on this. Don't forget, y'all, attendees, tomorrow, Thursday at 10 a.m., we're talking debt reduction strategies.
I love it.
Avalanche versus snowball, right? So join us for that session. We're going to dig into some of this. If you missed our sessions on Monday, we dug all the way in on Monday for budgeting strategies. But I love to hear what Lawrence is saying here now about not even just for our short-term goals, but if we are thinking about building generational wealth, right? You heard Lawrence just say it this now. We've got to be budgeting. This is why it's so critical. If you work in the Habitat program, on day one, what we do is create a budget, right? So remember, don't create a budget and throw it in the recycling bin, right? It should be a living, breathing document. Thanks, Lawrence, for sharing those resources as well. We dropped some of those in the chat. Tell us, attendees in the chat, if y'all are budgeting, if you use a budgeting app, or a resource that's helpful to share with others, drop it in the chat. Let us know. So Lawrence, let's transition into some of the specific strategies on how we can go about actually preserving some of our wealth long-term. You talked about already briefly on, life insurance. This is something that we talk about in our classes quite heavily as well. And then I know that, there's some other strategies in play too when we're talking about really protecting our wealth long-term. Can you help us dig into that?
Yeah, so I want to address both of them together, back to back, and so that for time purposes. So let's talk about wealth accumulation. On the accumulation side, right? So after we've built that foundation, we should have our contributions then going to assets that we own, right? So what do these assets look like? Well, assets would look like, of course, your real estate and your home ownership, right? That's an important part of your future in building generational wealth. So once we've built that foundation, we should then be at a stage where we can look at home ownership, right? Then we also are looking at market-based and equity-based investments, right? One of the best ways that you can do this is a lot of times through your employer-sponsored plan. So if you are employed somewhere, typically there is a 401k or 403b plan or that's been set aside to you, 457 for your governments. And a lot of times, especially on the 401k side, that money is matched. So one of the ways to think about this is that if you aren't contributing to your 401k, that means you're turning down 3 to 6% of the compensation that they're supposed to be paying you. And very few people would say, hey, just pay me 3% less, right? But that's what's happening when you're choosing not to contribute in those employer-sponsored plans. So that's the place that I would start with. Then, after you're doing that, you need that money to grow. So you want to have an investment allocation that is in line with your risk tolerance. There is nothing wrong with being conservative. There's nothing wrong with being aggressive. The only thing that something is wrong with is if you don't have that investments in line with your risk tolerance. What's the best way to find out what your risk tolerance is? Of course, fill out a risk tolerance questionnaire. Your company should provide that for you. But if that can't happen, then I want to go to the next one, and that is partner with a professional. There is nothing wrong with partnering with a professional to help you reach your goals, and that's not something you should shun. So partner with a professional that'll help you get there, right? So these are issues of wealth accumulation. When you start thinking about rental properties and all that kind of stuff, to be clear, those are good strategies too, but one of the things you need to make sure before you're getting into that is that your foundation is secure, that you've got your emergencies, and that you're not doing that in lieu of other ways to build your generational wealth, right? And people will sometimes be surprised that me as a certified financial planner who deals with investments say that, hey, yeah, real estate is a great concept. No, I do believe that owning additional properties is great. What I don't agree with is saying I'm only going to do real estate and ignore market-based investing. You really need to be diversified. Again, going back to a faith-based concept, scripture says to spread your seeds across your field, right? Do not find yourself, well, all of my wealth is built up in one asset. That's typically not the right concept. And on the opposite side, Blaine, we did talk about life insurance very briefly. What I will tell you about life insurance is buying time. It sounds silly, it sounds crazy, but in reality, that's what you're doing with life insurance. You're buying time. So for people like myself, and I would encourage this to be the mentality that we all create in our minds, building generational wealth is not an option, right? That's what I'm going to do. So then the issue when it comes to life insurance is the issue of time, right? I have a goal, and this isn't my goal, but I'm just giving you an example. Somebody could say, I have a goal that I'm going to leave $1 million to my children, right? Your goal is to build that up and to get there in 30 years. But the reality is that you don't control certain things such as when it's your time on earth. And so therefore, life insurance is covering that gap. If I don't make it to 30 years, they're still getting $1 million, right? So that's the concept there. And it's a risk management issue that's there. And there's going to be a lot of questions about what type of life insurance I should have. Should I have term? Should I have permanent policies? And there's a lot of people out there, especially insurance agents or radio personalities. They work opposite of each other, where they'll each will say that you should only have one type of policy, right? And as a CFP, I can tell you I don't agree with either one of them, right? What I do agree with, though, is that the death benefit should ultimately be what determines the life insurance that you have. So if somebody needs $1 million life insurance policy, you should always keep in mind that it doesn't matter if your premium is $25 through a term policy or $2,500 a month through a permanent policy. At the end of the day, that $1 million death benefit is going to pay $1 million if you die, right? So do not lower your death benefit trying to get some type of bells and whistles in a permanent policy. Don't do that. That doesn't mean that permanent policies aren't right in certain situations. It just means that you do not reduce your death benefit for the purposes of getting those bells and whistles.
And I will say, on the topic of life insurance, y'all know we have class for everything here, right? Our Habitat attendees already know. We do have a whole class on life insurance, y'all. And so if you missed that class, we hosted it just a couple of months back with some of our insurance partners. please go back and watch that. You can find it on our website, but we're going to dig into, like Lauren said, there's so much to learn about some of these topics. We're here just giving a high level overview today, but know that if you want to do a deep dive on any of this information, we've got a resource for you guys. Again, totally free, of course, and open to everyone. Hey, Lauren, we had a question in the chat from Detra who'd like to know, what is the typical percentage to contribute to a 401k?
Sure. So the typical percentage that you contribute to your 401k starts with, two concepts that I'm going to give you. The first one is that if it's a 401k, you want to make sure you're at least getting the match, right? So therefore, if I am saying, if the company is matching 5% of my contributions, then you want to be at least contributing 5% because that's part of your salary. And it's not a true 5% to you, especially if you're using the traditional 401k, because you're reducing your taxable income by doing that, right? Now, as a rule of thumb from a budgeting perspective, right? Just keep in mind at all times that budgeting is going to be based on your own personal values, and it's going to be on where you are in your life, right? So there's certain situations that are happening, but it's always a good idea as a benchmark to say is at least 10 to 15% of my current income going into retirement and savings-based accounts, right? So if I can then say at least 10 to 15% is going into some type of savings accounts. And by the way, your employer many times helps you there, because if you're contributing 5 and they're contributing 5, hey, we don't have that much longer to go, right? So if we can at least say that 10 to 15% of my salary is going towards retirement, you're on the right track. But keep in mind, the later that we're starting, the more we may need to make up, right? However, the most powerful number in these concepts is 0. All right. So don't get caught up into, oh, shoot, I should be contributing 9, but I can only contribute 5. So therefore, no, at the end of the day, the most powerful number is 0. If you're not contributing anything, you're going to end with nothing. So make sure you're contributing something and let that compounding interest build so that you can get to it through retirement and leave the legacy that you want for your children's children.
Thanks so much, Lauren. So we have one more question I think that we'll have time to get to here quickly. And that question is, and I think this is a really important question too, the question is, what if I'm on SSI? But I think I would make that a little broader, Lawrence, right? What if I'm on a limited income? Can I still think about some of these, big long-term financial goals and preserving my wealth for future generations?
Yeah. So let me finish us out then by telling the story of Osceola. Miss Osceola she made pennies. She never made more than minimum wage in her entire life. She washed clothes. That's all she did. And actually never had any kids either. And so all she did was just live by her budget. She had pennies, and then she put it at the end of the day, the quarters that she was making from washing people's clothes, she just put it in her savings account. At the time that she was about to retire and be done with it, and she was older, she didn't have much time to live. And so, she said, well, I need to start living off of some of this money. And she's like, well, some of it. And the banker was confused because, she came in, she told him how much she had made. Turns out she had a lot of money in her savings account. And they were like, well, wait a minute. We need to revisit this whole conversation, right? Now, by a lot amount, I'm not talking about Elon Musk money. What I mean by that is she had more money than what she actually needed to be able to get to and through retirement. So to keep it simple, the banker walked in with 10 coins and said, okay, that's the best way to think about this. Let's use these 10 dimes here, and you tell me how much you need to live off of. And she scraped off 4 dimes, and she said, I need to live off of that. And she said, okay, well, then based off of that, we're going to take the rest of this money. And the question was asked, well, what would you like to do with that? She said, I never got to go to school, so I gave it to, I wanted to give it to the college. And do you know what ended up happening? She ended up giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to the college that she wanted it to go to. But the story gets better, because after people found out what her story was, wealthy people continued to contribute to that scholarship. And therefore, there are scholarships in her name at the college that she had it sent to. And it gets even better. After that, an even wealthier person came in and said, you know what I want? I want a building with her name on it for anybody that goes to this school. What's my point here? At the end of the day, you have the opportunity to be able to pass down a generation. It may not look like Osceola's, but it may look like you saying, you know what, with my money, I'm going to make sure that I send my son or my grandson to a financial education class. I'm going to send them to a free resource. We're going to put them somewhere where they're going to be able to learn how to build generational wealth for themselves. And just by you being able to babysit that young girl's child while she goes out and learns how to budget, you have left the legacy that you were supposed to leave. And that's what this is all about. Building homes, building communities. And yes, you, whether you're on SSI or whether you're on limited income, you can still bring hope to the next generation.
Oh, I could not think or imagine a better note to end this on, Lawrence. That was a whole sermon. Okay, I'm fired up.
Amen.
It's a Wednesday, but it feels like Monday, 8 a.m. Let's get after it, y'all. That is amazing. Lawrence, genuinely, it has been an incredible pleasure having you for this event. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, all of your insight that you have shared with us today, for your positivity and your optimism to remind us that yes, we can do hard things. We will do hard things. And all the things that we think are hard are really that hard after all. So,
Blaine, can I give a really quick plug real quick?
Please.
Absolutely. So if you are on this call and you're really deciding that you need to work with some financial professionals to build wealth, I would like to give just a couple resources. CHIP Professionals, look up CHIP Pro. CHIP Professionals will put you into contact with financial advisors. It will put you in contact with CPAs. It will put you in contact with attorneys. And of course, Habitat for Humanity is also going to have resources in the same area. But CHIP Professionals, especially for those people of color, that will put you in front of somebody of color that will be able to help you. And of course, if you just want to email me a question, visit our website, www.elsvisionwealth.com. Again, www.elsvisionwealth.com, or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, ELS Vision Wealth Management. We will be honored to grow with you, to learn with you, and to be able to make this world a better place through proper stewardship. Thank you so much, Habitat, for having me on.
Oh, Lawrence, the pleasure is all ours. Y'all, no day like today. Take advantage. Make sure that you copy those links, copy that info out of that chat box. We're getting a lot of questions about accessing this recording on demand. Like all of our sessions this week, this session is recorded. It will be available on demand for you to watch anytime after the fact, rewatch. You need to rehear some of this information on our website starting on Friday afternoon. Lawrence, thank you so much. We really hope to have the opportunity to partner with you again. This is amazing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a great day, everyone. To our attendees, hopefully we see y'all tonight, 6 o'clock. We're talking all things retirement. Join us. We're going to build on this discussion. We'll see y'all then.